My name is Sharon Garcia, 32 years old, Denver, Colorado. 6 years ago, my family made a decision about me. I don't know exactly when it happened, whether it was a conversation or a silence that just grew until it had its own shape. But at some point, my father, my mother, and my sister agreed, without ever saying it out loud, that the kindest thing they could do was let me fail alone. My sister was the one who executed it. She blocked me first. Then my parents stopped returning calls. For 6 years, I was erased from the family group chat, the holiday photos, the dinner table conversations. Last month, Lumen Creative, the company I built in the years they weren't watching, hit $10 million. And then Carla knocked on my door at 1 a.m., shaking. There's something she never told me. I only found out what it was at 1 a.m. last November, standing in my kitchen in my socks, watching my sister fall apart in front of me for the first time in our lives. But before I get to that, I need to tell you who we were before the silence, because none of what happened later makes sense without the before. My father, Dr. Raymond Garcia, has been a general practitioner in Denver for over 25 years. He came up in a specific era of medicine, when the degree on the wall meant something absolute, when a white coat was not just clothing but a declaration of who you had decided to become. He practiced at St. Anthony Hospital on the same floor, in the same specialty, for most of my childhood. He bought a house in the Wash Park neighborhood in 2003. He drove a Volvo. He took the family to church on Easter and Christmas. He believed in discipline, structure, and the extraordinary safety of a path that had already been proven to work. My mother, Patricia, spent 20 years as a nurse before she stopped working to raise Carla and me. She was the softer of the two in presentation. Warmer voice, easier laugh, but not in substance. She had learned over decades of marriage to organize herself around my father's framework. Not because she had no opinions, she had plenty, but in our house, his architecture was the load-bearing wall. Everything else was built around it. My sister Carla is 4 years older than me. She is brilliant in the specific way that makes people call you reliable, precise, composed, never visibly rattled. She became a physician assistant at 32 and took a position at St. Anthony, the same hospital where my father had worked for 20 years. She had her own apartment 5 minutes away. Brunch with my parents most Sundays. Her life fit the template so cleanly it looked effortless. Growing up, dinner conversations in our house had a specific structure. My dad would ask what we'd learned that day. Carla would have an answer. I would improvise. I was not a bad student. I was a curious one, which in my family often looked like the same thing but wasn't. I asked questions that didn't have clean answers. I spent one entire summer teaching myself graphic design from YouTube tutorials and library books, which my father acknowledged once, briefly, with the kind of nod you give someone explaining a hobby you don't quite see the point of. Carla and I were close in the way that sisters are, when one of them is still figuring out where she fits, and the other one already knows. She stayed on the phone with me until 2 or 3 a.m., when I couldn't sleep. She knew my handwriting, my nervous habits, the specific way I went quiet when I was overwhelmed. She was the first person I called when anything happened. I want you to hold on to that version of her, the one who stayed up with me at 3 a.m., because she is the same person who, years later, blocked me on a Tuesday morning without a single word. And the distance between those two versions of her is most of what this story is about. I graduated from the University of Colorado Boulder in 2015 with a degree in marketing. My father came to the graduation. He shook my hand outside the arena in the bright June sun, and he said, "Now do something with it." That was the whole speech. He had wanted me to study pre-med or at minimum business with a healthcare administration track. Marketing was the compromise we arrived at after a conversation I remember less for what was said and more for what wasn't. He didn't forbid it. He just made clear, with the particular precision he reserved for clinical assessments, that he considered it a consolation choice, something you pursued when you didn't have the discipline for something harder. I spent the next 4 years at a company called Elevate Health Communications in downtown Denver, marketing coordinator, $52,000 a year, good health insurance, a 401k match, a boss who used the phrase, "Let's circle back on that," in every single meeting without apparent self-awareness. I was stable, I was functional, I was bored in a way that felt like water rising. Slowly, incrementally, never dramatically enough to justify alarm. But I stayed. For 4 years, I stayed. Not because I loved it, because I was waiting for permission to leave. And in my family, that permission had a very specific shape. It looked like my father nodding, setting down his fork, and saying, "That sounds reasonable." The permission never came. So eventually, I stopped waiting for it. The idea came together over about a year, starting in 2018. I kept seeing the same problem in my work at Elevate, and then in client conversations, and then everywhere I looked. Healthcare startups and mid-size wellness brands were getting destroyed in their marketing. Not because their products were weak, because their brand identity was non-existent. They had logos that looked like they were designed in 2004, websites with stock photos of people smiling at salads, social media that read like terms and conditions with a filter on top. Meanwhile, the agencies that could actually fix this were billing $500,000 retainers to hospital systems and pharmaceutical companies. Nobody was serving the middle, the $50,000 to $200,000 clients who needed serious creative work but couldn't justify a massive agency relationship. The gap was real, it was specific, and I could see exactly how to move through it. I wrote a business plan over 3 months, 14 pages, revenue projections for 3 years, target client profile, pricing model, go-to-market approach. I forecasted $120,000 in revenue the first year, based on 8 to 12 clients at $10,000 to $15,000 per project. I called the company Lumen Creative. Lumen, a unit of light. I wanted a name that felt like clarity, like being finally seen after a long time in the wrong frame. I showed the plan to exactly one person before I decided to quit. Carla. It was a Tuesday evening in June 2019. We sat in her kitchen, windows open, the light coming in low and warm. I slid the 14 pages across the counter. She poured herself a glass of wine and read every page without saying anything. When she finished, she set it down carefully, straightened the edges, and looked up. She didn't say it was exciting. She didn't say it was risky. She didn't say what I had been preparing myself to hear. She said, "Have you told Dad yet?" Not "this is interesting," not "I have concerns," just "have you told Dad?" I remember the quiet that followed, the way that question sat between us on the counter, next to the business plan, like something she'd placed there very deliberately. "Not yet," I said. "I'm going to tell him next Sunday." She nodded. She took a sip of wine. She said, "Okay." That was it. I drove home thinking the conversation had gone well. I should have heard the warning inside the question she asked, instead of the reaction she didn't give. I should have understood that "have you told Dad" was not curiosity. It was a preview. It was Carla already knowing what was coming and being unable, or unwilling, to say it directly. But I didn't hear it. That was the last time Carla and I sat together alone in a room without something broken between us. I told my father on a Sunday in September 2019. Dinner, roast chicken, my mother's green beans. A bottle of Malbec I'd brought because I thought it might soften something I didn't yet realize needed softening. Carla was there. Everything was ordinary. After the plates were cleared, I laid it out calmly, the way I'd rehearsed. The gap in the market, the business plan, the revenue projections, the name. I told him I planned to resign from Elevate in 2 weeks. My father listened without interrupting. That was his habit when he was preparing a response. He gave you the full rope. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his fork. He always set his fork down before he said something that mattered. Everyone at that table knew it. "This is a stupid idea, Sharon," he said. "Not naive, stupid. There's a difference." My mother said nothing. I looked at Carla. She was cutting her chicken. She didn't look up. "I have 14 pages of market analysis," I said. "The gap is real. The clients exist. I've modeled the revenue." "The gap is real," he repeated slowly, like he was examining a sample slide. "You're 26 years old. You've never run a business. You've never managed client relationships outside someone else's contract. And you want to leave a stable position at a reputable firm because you see a gap." "Yes," I said. "You have a degree from CU Boulder," he said, "and 4 years of real experience. Don't waste it on this." I looked around the table one more time. My mother had her hands folded in her lap. Carla was still looking at her plate. Nobody said anything else. I drove home in complete silence. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building on Colfax Avenue for 23 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I went upstairs and finished writing my resignation letter. I submitted my resignation on September 16th, 2019. That same day, I texted Carla. I did it, I put in my notice. The message sat on delivered for 3 days. On the third day, I checked again. Her contact photo was gone. The iMessage thread had turned green. She had blocked me. No call, no text, no explanation. She had simply removed me. I stood in my kitchen and stared at my phone for a long time. Then I put it face down on the counter and made coffee, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. "Sharon," she said, "your father is very disappointed." Then she hung up. Not "I'm disappointed," not "we're disappointed." Always, specifically, my father. As if her feelings required his attribution to be valid. As if even her disappointment was administered on his behalf. I noted that. I wouldn't fully understand what it meant until much later. Thanksgiving 2019. I called my mother 2 weeks before to ask about plans. She said, "It's going to be small this year." I waited. She didn't say anything else. "Small," I said. "Just immediate family," she said. "It's easier." I understood. I was no longer part of the geometry of immediate family. I had been subtracted, cleanly, with very little drama, like a variable removed from an equation that still balanced without it. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my apartment on Colfax. I ordered from a Peruvian restaurant 3 blocks away, $34. I remember the number because I checked my bank account afterward. $6,200 left. $6,200 between me and the place where I'd have to admit my father was right. That night I opened my laptop and worked until midnight. The following Monday, I got a notification. Carla had unfollowed me on LinkedIn, not just the personal block, the professional one too. She had excised me from every platform, every channel, every digital thread that connected our lives. That one landed differently than the others. I'm still not completely sure why. Maybe because LinkedIn felt deliberate in a specific way. It wasn't just personal distance. It was a signal that she didn't want even a professional association with what I was doing. That she was putting space between my name and hers, in a context where names and reputations are currency. I closed the app. I went back to my pitch deck. December 2019. I called my father to wish him a Merry Christmas. He picked up. The call lasted 4 minutes. He asked how things were going. I said they were going. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When you're ready to come back to reality, we'll be here." Then he hung up. I held the phone for a while after that. Not because I was devastated. I had been cycling through devastation and numbness on alternating days for 3 months, and I was getting to know both states well. I held it because something in me was calculating. He was waiting for a specific outcome. He was patient in the way that people are patient when they are certain of the result. He was sitting in his house in Wash Park, in his Volvo, in his 25 years of being right about how the world worked, and he was waiting for me to confirm his thesis. I made a decision in that moment that I have returned to many times since. I was not going to give him that. I put the phone down. I opened my laptop. I started writing a cold email to my first potential client. January 2020. Lumen Creative officially launched. February 2020. I had 3 warm leads and 2 conversations in progress. March 11, 2020. The world shut down. I had a pitch meeting scheduled for March 18th with a wellness startup in Boulder. They were exactly my target client, a mid-size integrative health practice that needed a full brand overhaul, photography direction, web redesign, the kind of project that would have been $18,000 and a solid portfolio piece. The email came at 11:47 p.m. the night before. "Hi Sharon, given current circumstances, we're pausing all non-essential spending indefinitely. We hope to reconnect when things stabilize. Stay safe." I sat with that email for a long time. The next day, 2 more prospects sent versions of the same message. Within a week, I had nothing in the pipeline. Healthcare marketing budgets had frozen. Every potential client was in crisis mode, pivoting to COVID communications, cutting everything else. I had $1,840 in my business account. Rent was $1,200 a month. I applied for unemployment. I was denied because I was technically self-employed. I remember standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning in April 2020, eating cereal because it was cheap, watching the street outside my window where nothing moved. I thought about calling my father. I picked up my phone. I had his number open. I put it back down, not out of pride, or not entirely, but because I knew what he would say. And I knew that hearing it at that moment, with $1,840 in my account and no clients, and a global pandemic dismantling every assumption I'd built my plan on, would not be a conversation. It would be a confirmation. And I was not ready to give him that confirmation. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I pivoted in May. Instead of full-scale brand projects, I started offering something smaller, brand audit packages. A deep analysis of a company's current visual identity, messaging, and positioning, with a written report and specific recommendations. $1,500, small enough that even a budget-frozen client could justify it as a necessary expense, concrete enough to deliver genuine value. I found 3 clients in May and June, small practices, one telehealth startup that had launched during COVID and needed help looking credible fast. None of them were the clients I had planned for, but they were real. In one client call that summer, the founder asked, "Are you a solo operation or do you have a team?" I said, without pause. "We're a focused team of specialists." It was not technically accurate. I was a team of 1, sitting at my kitchen table in a 620-square-foot apartment, wearing a blazer on top and sweatpants on the bottom because the camera only showed from the waist up. But as I said it, I understood something. That was not a lie. That was a vision statement. And the distance between where I was and where that sentence placed me was simply the work I still had left to do. Total revenue for 2020, $28,400, before expenses, before taxes. My salary at Elevate had been $52,000. I knew that number every single day. Christmas 2020. For the first time, I didn't reach out. No call, no text, no card. I decided to see what happened when I stopped initiating. When I let the silence exist on both sides and see what the other side did with it. Nothing. Nobody reached out. December 26, 2020, I sat with the fact that I had been completely silent for 12 months and not one member of my family had broken it. What surprised me was that it didn't feel like abandonment anymore. It felt like data. But there was one thing I couldn't quite place. Sometime in October 2020, I had posted a case study on Lumen Creative's Instagram, one of the small telehealth brand projects, before and after, with results. It was a modest post. Probably 30 people saw it. One of them, an account with no profile picture, no posts, following exactly one account, had liked it. The account followed only Lumen Creative. I noticed it. I didn't do anything about it. I didn't block it, didn't follow back, didn't investigate. I just left it. But I thought about it more than I admitted to myself. About who in my life would follow a ghost account. About who would want to watch without being seen. I left the door cracked, just in case. Revenue for the year, $89,000. The first year I made more than I had at Elevate. The first year the math started to feel like an argument rather than a prayer. But I was doing it alone. 70 to 80 hours a week, every week, for 12 months. By June I had stopped sleeping normally. By August I was sleeping too much. 12, 14 hours some days, not from depression exactly, but from a kind of systemic depletion that felt like my body had simply refused to continue without renegotiation. I remember waking up at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday and lying completely still, staring at the ceiling. Not sad, not happy, just empty, like I'd been running on something that had finally run out. That was the week I understood I needed help. In September 2021, I hired my first contractor, Brittany Walsh, a copywriter I'd found through a professional Facebook group based in Denver, charging $35 an hour. She was fast, she was sharp, and she understood healthcare language in a way that most generalist writers didn't. I sent her 3 test projects. She delivered all 3 ahead of schedule. I kept her on. December 2021. My mother called. I answered because it was the first call in over a year, and because I was a person who still answered calls from her mother despite significant evidence that this was not always a rewarding exercise. "Your father and I are going to Scottsdale for the holidays," she said, then a pause. "You should call Carla sometime." "Okay," I said. She hung up. Not "how are you," not "we miss you," not "let me explain why we've been silent for a year," just "you should call Carla sometime." As if the responsibility for repairing whatever had been broken was, as always, mine to initiate. As if I had done something to Carla, rather than the other way around. I did not call Carla. I closed my laptop, put on my coat, and walked around Wash Park for an hour in the December cold, alone, until I felt like myself again. Then I went home and worked until midnight. February 2022 was when everything changed. I had been in conversation with Meridian Wellness Group, a regional chain of integrative health clinics, 14 locations across Colorado and Utah, for 6 weeks. The initial outreach had been mine, a cold email to their VP of marketing that I had rewritten 11 times before sending. They needed everything: brand strategy, visual identity overhaul, digital content architecture, patient-facing communications across all locations. It was the kind of project I had written Lumen Creative to serve. The pitch meeting was in their conference room in Cherry Creek. I brought 2 team members, Brittany and a designer I had been contracting for 4 months. 3 people sitting across from 7. When I walked in and looked at their existing materials, I understood immediately that the gap I had identified in 2018 was still exactly where I had left it, still completely unaddressed. The pitch lasted 90 minutes. We got the contract. $180,000 for year 1, renewable with performance triggers. I remember driving back to my office, a co-working desk in Rhino that cost $400 a month, and sitting in my car in the parking garage for a while before going in. Not celebrating, just taking inventory of what it meant, of what it had cost to get to a room where that conversation was possible. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten cereal for dinner in 2020, where I had written cold emails to clients who never replied, and I signed the contract. I texted Donna. Donna Reyes had been my closest friend since Boulder, nurse practitioner in Fort Collins, the only person outside of Lumen who knew what I was building. Our entire celebration system for 2 years had been, I send a number, she replies with go off. I sent, $180,000 contract signed. She replied in 20 seconds, go off, and then a string of flames. I put my phone face down on the table and let myself sit in it for exactly 10 minutes. Then I opened the next proposal. Total revenue for 2022, $420,000. In September, I signed a lease on a proper office space in the Rhino Art District. $1,800 a month, a room with windows and a kitchen and a table long enough for an actual team. The day I moved in, I bought a succulent from the plant shop downstairs, $12. I paid with the Lumen Creative credit card, the first time I'd used it for something that wasn't strictly necessary. I kept the receipt. The anonymous account liked another post in October 2023. By then I had noticed the pattern. It only appeared for milestones, not the day-to-day content, not the process posts or the general updates, only the things that mattered. The Meridian announcement, the new office, the team photo we'd taken in July when we reached 8 full-time employees. This time, I clicked on the profile. No photo, no posts, no bio, 0 followers, following one account, Lumen Creative. I sat with that for a while. Whoever this was, they had been watching for 3 years. They had tracked every significant moment carefully enough to know which ones to mark. They were doing it quietly, invisibly, in a way that left almost no trace. I thought about blocking it. I thought about sending a message. I did neither. I don't know why I didn't block it, I wrote in my journal that night. Maybe I wanted to be seen. Maybe I needed someone from that part of my life to witness what I was building, even if they'd never say so. Or maybe I was just leaving the door open a crack, just in case. I closed my journal. I went back to work. That same month, Colorado Biz Magazine ran a short feature, 2 paragraphs, my name, a photo of the Rhino office. The headline read, Denver's Quiet Disruptors, 5 agencies redefining healthcare marketing. I bought a copy. I took it out of my bag every few days and looked at it. I thought about mailing it to my parents. I bought a stamp. I put it in my coat pocket and carried it around for 2 weeks. I never sent it. Eventually, I framed it and put it on the wall of my office, behind my desk, where I could see it every day without having to explain it to anyone. 2023 ended at $1.2 million in revenue. I hired Daniel Foster as COO in January 2024. 38 years old, former VP of marketing at a mid-size healthcare system in Phoenix. He came from a world where everything moved through committees and approval chains and 12-person email threads. His first week, he kept asking who he needed to copy on decisions. I said, "Just me." He looked genuinely confused. By week 3, he stopped asking. We expanded outside Colorado in Q2 2024, 3 clients in California, 2 in Texas, 1 in Nashville. In September, I signed a lease on a proper office at 1400 Wewata Street in downtown Denver, 3,200 square feet, a conference room with a glass wall, a kitchen where people actually made coffee and talked to each other. I signed the lease alone, my signature on the dotted line, my company's name at the top of the document, my hand steady on the pen. Total revenue for 2024, $4,800,000. Nobody in my family knew. In September, after we moved into the Wewata office, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize, a random string of characters that made it impossible to reply to. The subject line was one word: congratulations. No body text, no signature, nothing. I stared at it for a long time. Then I marked it as spam and went back to a client proposal I was reviewing. But I thought about it for days afterward. The precision of the timing, the single word, the untraceable address, someone who knew, who had been watching closely enough to know the office news, the expansion, the scale of what Lumen had become, and couldn't stay completely silent, but also couldn't break the silence properly. One word through a ghost email, a hand reaching through a wall that they weren't ready to take down. I filed it away. I kept working. October 14th, 2025. My CFO, a fractional hire, sharp woman named Gwen, who worked with 4 companies and ran financials like a surgeon, sent me the Q3 close report at 9:06 a.m. I read it once. Then I read it again, then a third time. Lumen Creative had crossed $10 million in year-to-date revenue. I sat at my desk at 1400 Wewata and did not move for several minutes. The succulent from 2022 was still on the corner of my desk, slightly larger than when I'd bought it, still in the same ceramic pot. I looked at it for a while. I texted Donna, 10 million. She replied in 30 seconds. Go off, all caps, 7 flame emojis. I put my phone face down. I didn't post anything, no announcement, no press release, no dinner with the team. I ordered pizza to the office at 6 o'clock, and we worked until 10. The next morning, I was in at 8. 6 years earlier, I had been sitting in my car in a parking garage with $1,840 in my account, eating cereal for dinner, blocked by my sister, erased from my family's holiday table. I held both things simultaneously and let them exist next to each other without trying to resolve them. 4 weeks later, at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, someone knocked on my door. November 11th, 2025. I had worked from home that day. A client call in the morning, proposal review in the afternoon. An email thread with a new prospect in Phoenix that had gone later than I expected. Around 10 o'clock, I closed my laptop, poured a glass of wine, sat on my sofa, and did something I almost never allowed myself to do: nothing. I sat in the silence of my apartment and I let it exist without filling it. My apartment was in Wash Park. I had moved back to the neighborhood in 2023, not deliberately close to my parents, not deliberately distant either. The house where I'd grown up was 0.8 miles from my front door. I had walked past it a few times without stopping. I never went in. That night, sitting with my wine in the quiet, I thought about my father's dining room table. I thought about the way Carla had cut her chicken without looking up. I thought about a question I had never quite been able to answer. Had she agreed with him that night? Or had she simply been unable to disagree? I had spent 6 years deciding it was the former. Sometime around midnight, I checked my phone, found nothing, and went to bed. I lay in the dark. I was not quite asleep when it happened. Not quite awake either, that particular in-between state where your thoughts start to lose their edges. I thought about the anonymous account. I had gone back to it a few weeks earlier and looked at the list of posts it had liked, 11 total over 5 years. Every single one was a milestone. Not random engagement, curated attention, someone who knew my work well enough to identify the significant moments and mark them precisely. I thought about the email, congratulations, one word. I thought about the stamp I'd never used. 1:03 a.m., 3 knocks. I didn't move immediately. I lay in the dark and listened. The knocks were not frantic, not urgent in the way of an emergency, just present, insistent in a quiet way, like someone who had thought very carefully about whether to knock at all and had decided yes, but softly. I got up. I did not turn on the lights. I walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. Carla was standing in the hallway. She was not looking at the door. She was looking down, slightly to the left, the way people look when they are having an interior conversation and losing it. She was wearing hospital scrubs, dark blue, the St. Anthony color. Her shift would have ended at 11. She had driven here directly. Her hair was still in the braid she wore for work, pieces of it coming loose. There was mascara tracked down her left cheek. Her hands were clasped in front of her, fingers interlaced, and they were visibly shaking. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had been remembering her as larger than she was. I stood at the door for a long time. She knocked again. Softer this time. Like she wasn't entirely sure she had the right. I stood there and I thought, this is the moment. Not the $10 million. Not the Meridian contract, or the Wiwata office, or any of the numbers I had accumulated over 6 years. This moment, right here, is the one that determines what the next 6 years look like. I could not have told you, in that moment, what the right choice was. I opened the door. She looked at me, I looked at her. Neither of us said anything for several seconds. I know it's late, she said. I know, I said. I stepped back. Not an invitation exactly, more like removing an obstacle. She came in. I did not hug her. I did not offer coffee. I stood in my kitchen in my socks, and I waited. She came in slowly, the way someone enters a room they've been thinking about but never seen. She looked at the kitchen counter, the succulent, the framed Colorado Biz article on the wall behind my desk, visible from where she stood. She looked at the article for a moment. "This is nice, Sharon," she said quietly. "Why are you here, Carla?" She turned to face me. She opened her mouth, then she closed it. She looked like someone sorting through a long list of things she had prepared to say, finding none of them adequate. "Dad had a cardiac event tonight," she said. The room was very quiet. "Cardiac event," I said. "Non-STEMI. He's stable. He's in the ICU at St. Anthony. They're doing a cath in the morning. It's scheduled for 8 o'clock. Dr. Harmon is on. He'll be okay." She said it in the cadence of clinical reporting. Physician assistant voice. The voice you learn to use when the information is emotional, but the delivery needs to be controlled. "Okay," I said. She looked at me. She was waiting for something, and I could see it. The way she held herself slightly forward, braced for a response that didn't come. "He asked me not to call you," she said. That landed differently, I felt it. Not as a shock exactly, because some part of me had always known this was the architecture beneath the silence. But to hear it said plainly, in my kitchen, at 1 a.m., was different from knowing it abstractly. "He asked you not to call me," I said. "Yes." "And you called me anyway." She didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her hands, the same hands I had watched shake through the peephole, and she pressed them flat against the counter. "I drove here," she said. "I didn't call, I came." There was a distinction in that. I wasn't sure yet what it meant. "Why?" I said. She didn't answer right away. She moved toward the kitchen table, and then she sat down, without being invited, without asking. She just sat the way someone sits down when they have been standing too long and their body has finally made the decision for them. She sat like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and had just put it down. Whatever the something was, she had put it down on my kitchen table, and now she was going to have to say what it was. I stayed standing. I waited. "In September 2019, she said, after you left that dinner, after Dad said what he said. He sat with the three of us for a while. After you left." She stopped, started again. "He said, he was calm the way he always is. He said, Sharon is going to do this regardless of what we say. She's made her decision. And then he said, we will not watch her fail publicly. If she comes back, she comes back. Until then, we give her space." I said, "Space." "That's the word he used." "And you just agreed." She was quiet for a long moment, then, "I thought he was right," she said. "At the time, I thought he understood how the world worked better than either of us did. I thought the kindest thing really was to step back, to not watch, to not make it harder." "The kindest thing," I said. "Sharon, so you blocked me, on a Tuesday morning, without a single word." "Yes. And then the Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and then the next year, and the one after that." She didn't answer. She looked at her hands on my table. 6 years, Carla. I know. 6 years of... I stopped. Not because I ran out of words. I had an entire inventory of words. I had been adding to it for 6 years, one entry at a time, on nights when I was too tired to keep the accounting separate from the work. I had the whole speech ready. I had written it in my head 100 different times in 100 different moods. I said none of it, because I looked at her sitting at my table, and I understood suddenly that she already knew. She had always known. The speech I had prepared was not information she was missing. It was a bill I was trying to hand her for something she had been paying for privately, in a currency I couldn't see, for years. I sat down across from her. The Instagram account, I said. She went very still. The anonymous one, I said. The account with no profile picture, following one account. She didn't say anything. It was you, I said. It was not a question. She looked at me for a long moment, then she said, yes. The kitchen was completely silent. October 2020, I said. October 13th, she said. The telehealth rebrand case study. I thought about that. October 13th, 2020. I had been 6 months into a pandemic, with no clients and $1,840 in the bank, eating cereal for dinner and wondering if I had made an irreversible mistake. And my sister had found my work and looked at it and liked it from behind a wall of anonymity that kept her safe, that kept the pact intact, that let her watch without being seen. How long? I said. 5 years, she said. Almost exactly. The email, I said. The one-word email. Congratulations. She nodded. Why? I asked. Not angrily. I was past anger. I was somewhere beyond it, in a territory I didn't have a clean name for. Why watch for 5 years and never say anything? Why an anonymous account? Why a ghost email? She breathed. Because I needed to know you were okay, she said. And I couldn't ask, because asking would have been... It would have broken the thing Dad had constructed. It would have been a choice, and I wasn't ready to make the choice. But you were watching. I was always watching. Every milestone. Every one. I sat with that. The Meridian announcement, I said. February 2022. The Wawada office. September 2024. The 10 million. October 14th, she said. I saw the Colorado Biz follow-up piece. I did the math. You knew. I've known about most of it, she said. For years. The silence stretched out between us. Outside, Denver was quiet in the way it gets after midnight in November. That specific winter stillness where even the traffic sounds different, smaller, more careful. Why now? I said finally. You knew about the 10 million. You could have come then. Why tonight? She looked at me. And for the first time, I saw it. Not the composed Carla, not the physician assistant, not the person who had executed my father's directive with clinical precision for 6 years. I saw the other one, the one who used to stay on the phone until 3 a.m., the one who knew my handwriting and my nervous habits and the way I went quiet when I was overwhelmed. She was terrified. Because I was afraid, she said. Not of you failing. That was never it. I was afraid of what would happen to me if I chose your side, of what I would lose, my position, my place, the thing I had spent 36 years being, the one who did it right. She stopped, started again. I watched you build something for 5 years while I stayed on the same floor next to Dad's office, going home to Sunday brunch, being exactly what was expected of me. And I kept telling myself I had made the right choice. That stability was the right choice. That family was the right choice. But, I said, I've been watching Lumen for 5 years, Sharon. I've watched you build something from nothing, alone. While Dad... She stopped. He was wrong, she said. He was wrong, and I knew it by 2021, and I didn't say it, to him or to you. And I don't know what to do with that. I've been carrying it for 4 years, and I don't know what to do with it. I looked at her. I thought about what it would have meant in 2021 for Carla to challenge my father, to call me, to say, I see what you're building, I was wrong. I thought about what that would have cost her, the Sunday brunches, the position at St. Anthony, the identity she had organized her entire adult life around. I thought about whether I would have had the courage if our positions had been reversed. Tonight, I said, he was in the ER and he told you not to call me. He said it in the ambulance, she said, before we even got to the hospital. He looked at me and he said, "Don't call Sharon." And I sat in that ER for 3 hours thinking about the 5 years of that account. The email I sent from a ghost address because I couldn't send it from my real one. The stamp you never sent. I went very still. "I saw the Colorado Biz piece," she said quietly. "I saw you bought the stamp. In the background of a photo you posted. It was on your desk, on top of the envelope. You'd addressed it. You never sent it." I thought about the stamp. The envelope with my parents' address in my handwriting. The 2 weeks it lived in my coat pocket before I stopped carrying it. "No," I said. "I never sent it." "I know," she said. "Because I didn't want a response," I said. "I didn't want to give him the chance to say the wrong thing about it." She nodded. "I understand that now," she said. We sat in silence for a while. "Why didn't you reach out years ago?" I said. "When you knew I wasn't failing. When you knew the gap I saw was real. When you had proof." "Because coming to you with proof felt like I was coming to congratulate myself for having doubted you. Like I wanted credit for eventually noticing what should have been obvious." She looked at her hands. "I didn't deserve to come to you when things were good for you. I thought if I was ever going to come, it had to be because I chose you, not because you'd made it safe to." "And tonight," I said, "was the first time you chose me." "Tonight," she said, "was the first time I refused him. In 36 years. The room was very, very quiet. I sat across from her and I thought about everything I had believed the silence meant. I had believed it meant she agreed with him, that she had looked at my plan, at my ambition, at me, and had reached the same verdict. Not worth it, not serious, not enough. I had built the entire first 3 years of Lumen Creative, partly in response to that verdict, partly to disprove it. But that wasn't what it had been. It hadn't been contempt. It had been fear. Carla's specific fear, the fear of a person who has defined herself entirely by one thing and cannot risk the thing that would require her to redefine. It was smaller than I had made it in my mind. And somehow, that made it harder. "I spent 6 years thinking you hated me," I said. My voice was even. "Or that I had disappointed you badly enough that I wasn't worth keeping. That I had done something unforgivable just by wanting a different life." She looked at me. "You didn't hate me," I said. "You were scared. And somehow that's harder to hold than hatred. Because at least if you hated me, it would have been about me, a verdict about who I was or what I was doing, something I could push against." I paused. "But it wasn't about me at all, was it? It was never really about me." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. "Does he know?" I said. "About Lumen, about the 10 million. "No," she said. "I never told him." "Did he ever ask about me? In 6 years? She took a breath. "Once," she said, "about 2 years ago. He asked if I'd heard from you. I said no, which was technically true. You hadn't reached out to me. He said, 'She'll come back when she's ready.' And then he changed the subject." "She'll come back when she's ready," I repeated. "Yes," I nodded. I thought about my father. Not the cold version I had been carrying. The version who set down his fork and delivered verdicts with clinical precision. The other version. The man who had spent 25 years believing that the most loving thing you could do for someone was protect them from the consequences of their own choices. Who had watched me walk towards something he was certain would break me and had turned away because he could not bear to watch the break. Who had asked about me, once quietly 2 years in, and then moved on to something else, because moving on was the only thing he knew how to do with things he couldn't fix. He was waiting for me to come back. He had been waiting for 6 years. In his framework, coming back meant I had recalibrated, that I had accepted reality, that the silence had done its work. He didn't know he had been waiting for the wrong thing. "Okay," I said. Carla looked at me. "Okay," I said again, just that. Because I had nothing else right then. Not forgiveness. That was too large and too complicated for 2 a.m. on a kitchen chair. Not absolution. Not the speech I had been composing for 6 years. Just okay, the next thing. The small foothold. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. For the first time since June 2019, she looked exhausted. Not tonight exhausted. Years exhausted. The kind of tired that collects over a long time and sits in the face, in the shoulders, in the way someone holds their hands when they think nobody is watching. I recognized it. I had looked exactly the same way once. It was 2:30 in the morning. I did not let her drive home. Not because I had forgiven her. I hadn't. Not cleanly, not yet. But because it was 2:30 a.m. and she had been at the hospital for 3 hours, and her hands had been shaking when I opened the door, and she was my sister, and those facts existed regardless of everything else. I got a blanket from the closet, a pillow. The couch, I said. You can leave at 6:30 if you need to be there for the cath. She took the blanket. Her hands had stopped shaking. Thank you, she said, in a voice I had never heard from her before, careful, small, uncertain of its own welcome. Yeah, I said. I went to bed. I lay in the dark and I thought, this is not forgiveness. This is not reconciliation. This is not the end of anything or the beginning of anything I can clearly name yet. This is just the next thing. The first small step into the territory that comes after 6 years of silence, and I can decide what comes after the next thing when I get there. I thought about my father, stable in the ICU at St. Anthony, 3 blocks from where he had practiced for 25 years. I had his number. I had never deleted it. Through everything, I had never deleted it. I could call in the morning. I could walk the 0.8 miles to the hospital and sit in the waiting room while they did the cath and be there when he came out. I thought about what he had said 2 years ago. She'll come back when she's ready. He meant it as patience, as an open door, but it was the wrong door. He was waiting for me to walk through an entrance that required me to have been wrong, to come back diminished, recalibrated, in need of the structure I had walked away from. I had built something. I had not been wrong. I opened my nightstand drawer. Inside was a journal, the same one I'd been keeping since 2019. I flipped to the entry from September 19th, 2019. Carla blocked me today. I don't know what this means yet. I'm going to find out. I closed the journal without adding anything. I put it back in the drawer. I closed my eyes. 6:30 a.m. I woke to the sound of movement in the kitchen. When I came out, Carla was already up, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee she had made herself. She was still in her scrubs. Her hair was redone, pulled back cleanly, the braid back in place. She had washed her face. She looked like herself again, the composed version, the PA, the daughter who did it right. Except that she was sitting at my table, in my apartment, and her hands were wrapped around the mug like she needed the warmth. I sat down across from her. I'm going back at 7, she said. The cath is at 8. Dr. Harmon's good. He'll be fine. Okay, I said. We sat for a moment. Outside, the light was coming up over Wash Park. That particular early winter light that was gray and thin and somehow still beautiful, if you were willing to look at it as what it was rather than what it wasn't. Do you want me to tell you how it goes? She asked. The cath. Do you want me to text you? I sat with that. I thought about what yes meant. Not just today. The cath result, the update, the clinical report delivered through a text message between 2 people who were still standing at the edge of 6 years of distance, trying to decide how much of it to cross. I thought about what yes meant going forward. The conversation with my father that hadn't happened yet. The Sunday brunches I had not been to. The shape of whatever came next. I thought about the door I had left cracked for 5 years while an anonymous account watched every milestone in silence. Yes, I said. She nodded. She stood, rinsed her mug at the sink, set it in the drying rack. She put on her coat. She picked up her keys. At the door, she paused. She turned back toward the kitchen, toward the counter, the succulent, the framed article on the wall. The succulent, she said. Is that from when you got the Reno office? 2022, I said. She looked at it for a moment. Good, she said. Then she left. I sat at my kitchen table after she was gone. Her coffee mug was in the drying rack. The apartment was quiet in the particular way it is after someone leaves. The specific absence of a presence that was just there. I thought about calling my father. I had my phone on the table. I had his number. I had had his number for 6 years, unchanged, never deleted, sitting in my contacts like a sentence I hadn't finished writing. I picked up the phone. I put it back down, not out of anger. I want to be clear about that. Anger had been the wrong word for what I'd been carrying for most of this. It was something more complicated, more structural. It was the understanding that my father had a door open for me, had been waiting for me to walk through it for 6 years. But that door led back to the conversation of September 2019. Back to, you were wrong, I was right, now you understand. back to a version of me that had needed his permission to start and would now need his permission to continue. I had a door too. Mine opened differently. My father was going to be okay. He would do the cath at 8. He would be in recovery by noon, and sometime in the next weeks or months, there would be a conversation, maybe more than one. I didn't know what shape it would take. I didn't know if the framework he had built, the one where silence was kindness and the right path was the proven one, would ever be fully dismantled. I didn't know if I wanted to be the one to dismantle it. But I was not ready to have that conversation today. And for the first time in 6 years, not being ready felt like a choice I was allowed to make. Not a wound, not a retreat, a choice. Calm, deliberate, made with both eyes open. He had kept the door open for me to come back on his terms. I had my own door. It opened on mine. I went to work at 8 a.m. I answered 3 emails, reviewed a proposal, made a note for Daniel about the Phoenix prospect. At 9:15, I had a call with a new client in Nashville. At 11:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Carla. He's out, cath went well, 2 stents, he'll be home by Thursday. I looked at it for a moment. I typed back, thank you, 2 words. I sent them, put the phone face down, and finished my call. We haven't spoken again since then. But the silence between us is different now. The old silence had been sealed, smooth on both sides, no purchase, nowhere to grip. This one has something in it. It has the conversation we had at 1 a.m. It has the coffee mug in the drying rack. It has the word good she said before she walked out the door. This silence has a door in it. And that, for now, is enough. Here is what 6 years of building in the dark taught me. The people who underestimate you are often more afraid than you are. My father was not a cruel man. He was a man who had spent his entire adult life inside one definition of success, earned through discipline, credentialed, legible, proven, and watching me walk away from it was, to him, like watching someone step off a ledge. He thought the kindest response was to step back and let the fall happen without witnesses, to not make it harder, to wait. He was wrong about the fall, but I've stopped needing him to know that before I can move forward. My sister was not a villain. She was a person who had organized her entire identity around one set of expectations, and choosing me would have required her to question all of it. And she was not ready, and fear is not the same as cruelty, even though it can produce the same results. She watched for 5 years, from behind a wall she didn't know how to take down. And when she finally broke, it wasn't because I had hit $10 million. It wasn't because I had proven anything. It was because she was scared and tired, and she was not willing to enforce the silence one more time. That's not a dramatic redemption. It's not a clean resolution. Real things rarely are. What I know is this. I built $10 million in revenue inside 6 years of being told, in silence, that I couldn't. And the most important thing I built was not the revenue or the office or the team. It was the understanding that other people's frameworks for what is possible are not facts about you. They are facts about them. If you are building something right now, if you are in the part of the story where the bank account is wrong and the people you love have gone quiet, and the only evidence you have that you're not making a mistake is your own certainty, I want you to hear this. Their silence was never a verdict. It was a wall they built because they were scared of what you might prove. Keep building. If any part of this landed somewhere real for you, leave a comment. I read them, not every day, but I read them. And if you know someone who is in the middle of their own silence right now, send this to them. That's the only thing I would have wanted someone to do for me.